It was just before dawn in the New Mexico desert, the kind of hour when the world feels half asleep and the sky is a canvas waiting for the sun's first brushstroke. In the thin silence, Ryan Quinn sat alone on the steps of his rundown trailer, hugging his knees, staring out at nothing. His breath came out in little clouds, white against the chill that always crept through the cracked metal walls each night. He was 15, and he'd learned how to be invisible, how to get by on less than anyone else, how to count stars instead of friends. His mother and little sister were gone now, just shadows in old photos, echoes in a place that always felt too big and too empty. Ryan wasn't waiting for a miracle. He'd stopped believing in those a long time ago. That morning, though, the desert had other plans. A sound cut through the dawn's hush, raw, desperate, not like any coyote's call or wind in the sagebrush. Ryan stiffened, scanning the open land, heart thudding. Was it a cry? A wail? He pushed off the steps, dust sticking to his bare feet, and jogged toward the noise, half afraid it was nothing, half afraid it was something worse. What he saw stopped him cold. Out in the blue-gray half-light, a wild Mustang limped across the scrub, head low, sweat and blood streaking its golden coat. Its mane was tangled with burrs and thorns. Behind it, dragging through the dirt, was a battered old baby stroller, the kind you see at thrift shops, all faded pink and rusted metal, the wheels barely turning. The Mustang, legs shaking, was tethered to the stroller by a strip of torn fabric, moving forward with agonizing slowness, every step a battle. Ryan blinked, not trusting his eyes. The Mustang, here? Wild horses usually kept far away from the trailer park, spooked by humans. But this one, it looked right at him, brown eyes fierce and pleading. There was something unnatural about it, something urgent. Like the horse was carrying the weight of a secret across the endless sand. He took a few cautious steps closer, arms up, palms out. "Easy," he whispered, his voice cracking. The Mustang stopped, nostrils flaring, muscles quivering. That's when Ryan saw the stroller jolt and heard a tiny, choking cough. No way. Inside the battered stroller, bundled in filthy blankets, was a little girl, no older than 2. Her hair was plastered to her face, cheeks streaked with tears and dirt. Her skin was pale, lips blue, eyes sunken. She barely looked alive. She gripped a scrap of paper in her fist, her whole body trembling with fever. Ryan's heart lurched in his chest. "Hey," he said, voice trembling. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here." Not sure if he was talking to the horse or the child, or just trying to calm himself. He knelt down, his knees sinking into the sand. The Mustang stood over him, like a guardian. Up close, Ryan saw deep cuts along its flank and a twisted hind leg that barely held weight. He reached for the note. The girl whimpered, clutching tighter, but finally let go. Ryan unfolded the crumpled paper with shaking hands. Scrawled in shaky letters, "Her name is Hope. Please save her. I couldn't go further." His throat closed. He stared at the girl, Hope, and the word echoed inside him, louder than any voice he'd ever heard. Hope. Please save her. For a second, Ryan wanted to run, to leave this impossible moment behind. He was a kid, just a kid, living in a broken trailer with no family, barely enough food to last the week. He didn't know how to save anyone. The Mustang let out a low, desperate whinny, pawing at the dirt, eyes wild. I can't do this," Ryan whispered. He shook his head, tears stinging his eyes. "This isn't real." But then Hope whimpered again, weak and hoarse, reaching out a tiny hand. The Mustang nudged Ryan's shoulder, pressing closer. its body a wall of heat and pain. Something inside Ryan snapped. Some old dam built up by too many lonely nights, too many days of pretending not to care. He reached into the stroller, carefully, lifting the girl into his arms. She was so light, barely heavier than the battered blanket wrapped around her. Her head lolled against his shoulder, eyes fluttering. "It's okay," he said, this time steady, fierce. "You're safe now, I promise." He glanced at the Mustang. "You too. Come on," he whispered. The horse limped after him, dragging the battered stroller, refusing to let it go. Back at the trailer, Ryan kicked the door open with his heel, heart racing. He laid Hope on the old couch, tearing open what was left of his emergency first aid kit, Band-Aids, half a bottle of antiseptic, a cracked ice pack. He tried to remember everything his mother had ever taught him about fevers, dehydration, about hope. He dashed outside to the water barrel, filled a cup, brought it back, spilling half along the way, and trickled drops onto the little girl's lips. "Stay with me, Hope," he pleaded. "You gotta fight." The Mustang waited outside the window, refusing to budge, watching every move. Ryan felt its eyes on him, as if it understood more than any human ever could. Dawn finally broke, painting the desert in pink and gold. Ryan, exhausted, sat by Hope's side, listening to her uneven breaths, wondering what kind of world could leave a child and a wild horse clinging to life at his doorstep. He looked at the note again. "Her name is Hope. Please save her," and realized that for the first time in a long time, he wanted to fight for something. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But he knew one thing. He was all Hope had now, and somehow he'd find a way to save her, no matter what it cost. "You hear me, kid?" he murmured, tucking the blanket under Hope's chin. Feeling the weight of the Mustang's gaze. "I won't let you go." Outside, the wind shifted, and Ryan knew nothing would ever be the same again. Ryan's hands shook as he knelt beside the couch, watching the little girl, Hope, tremble with fever. The air in the trailer was heavy, sticky with fear. Outside, the desert sky darkened, strange for this early in the day. The Mustang, battered and bleeding, stood at the broken window, its breath fogging the glass, eyes fixed on the girl inside. Ryan drew a ragged breath, forcing himself to focus. He remembered his mother's voice, soft but steady, teaching him how to care for his baby sister during the long nights of cough and fever. Cool cloth, always water, keep her awake. He tore his last clean t-shirt into strips and soaked them in water from the barrel, laying one across Hope's burning forehead. Her eyelids fluttered. She whimpered, turning her head away. Ryan squeezed her tiny hand, feeling how thin and fragile her bones were. "Stay with me, Hope," he said, swallowing the lump in his throat. He fetched more water, holding the rim of the cup to her lips, dribbling it in, drop by precious drop. Most of it ran down her chin, but some she managed to swallow, coughing. Her skin was hot to the touch, alarmingly so. He dug through drawers and found the cracked thermometer. 103.6, he cursed under his breath. That was too high. Thunder grumbled in the distance. Ryan glanced at the window. Clouds were rolling in, thick and red with sand. He'd lived in New Mexico his whole life. He knew what that meant. Sandstorm. He scrambled outside, the wind already picking up, and looked at the Mustang. It was trembling, legs locked in place. Blood had caked along its side where the wounds had scabbed over. "You need shelter," he muttered. "Come on the shed, it's safer." He tried coaxing the horse toward the rickety old shed, But Solace, the name felt right somehow, refused to budge, stamping the dirt, tossing its head, fixing those wild eyes on the trailer window. Ryan understood. The horse wasn't leaving Hope. Neither was he. Inside, Hope began to shiver uncontrollably. Ryan stripped the blankets from his own bed, piling them around her, desperate to trap in what little warmth she had left. The wind howled louder, rattling the trailer's walls. Grit seeped through every crack. Ryan rushed to shove towels along the windowsills, braced a heavy chair against the door, taped cardboard over broken panes. His hands bled from the work, but he didn't care. "You're safe here," he promised, pressing a kiss to Hope's clammy forehead. Lightning lit up the desert. The world outside was erased by blowing sand, sky and earth turning red and gray, the noise like a freight train screaming through their tiny home. The Mustang planted itself just beneath the window, broad chest turned into the wind, blocking the worst of the storm with its battered body. Ryan watched, awed, as Solace stood firm, tail lashing, head bowed, taking the brunt of nature's fury so that Hope could rest. Dust poured over the horse's back, clinging to every wound, but still it did not move. Inside, Ryan sang softly, songs his mother used to hum. Hope's breathing was shallow but steady. For hours he fought to keep her cool, roused her when she slipped toward unconsciousness, forced her to sip water, whispering stories in the dark. The air inside thickened with dust and hope and worry. Every second, a battle against despair. At the storm's height, something slammed into the trailer, sending a crack through the back wall. Ryan gasped, throwing himself over Hope's small body, bracing for the worst. Sand whirled through the room in angry spirals, but the trailer held. The Mustang, Solace, bellowed outside, a long, haunting sound that made Ryan's skin crawl. "I can't do this alone," Ryan whispered, voice cracking. He looked at Hope, at the trembling horse. And something inside him hardened. He refused to lose anyone else. Not tonight. Time twisted. The world was only wind and dust and the pounding of Ryan's own heart. He counted breaths, counted lightning flashes, lost track of the hours. At some point, Hope's eyes opened, just a sliver, and she stared up at him, silent but alive. "That's it," he said. "Just hang on a little longer." Eventually the wind faded, the light outside shifting from red to pale gold as dawn approached. Ryan, exhausted beyond words, stumbled to his feet. Hope slept, her breathing easier now, the fever's fire finally dying down. Ryan crept to the window, wiping away a layer of dust with his sleeve. The Mustang was still there, but something was wrong. Solace wasn't standing tall anymore. The horse lay on its side, half covered in sand, chest barely rising. Ryan threw open the door, running barefoot into the cold morning. He dropped to his knees in the dirt, hands shaking. Solace's eyes were half closed, still turned toward the trailer, toward Hope's window. "No, please, come on," Ryan pleaded, stroking the horse's muzzle. Solace's breath rattled in his throat. Ryan saw the wounds were worse than he realized, some infected, others torn open by the storm. The horse's coat was matted with blood and sand, the once proud mane tangled beyond repair. Solace tried to lift his head, but it fell back to the ground. Ryan sobbed, the first tears he'd allowed in so long. His fingers buried in Solace's mane. The horse let out one last, shuddering breath, and then silence. Ryan stayed there for a long time, kneeling in the sand, the wind swirling around him, the sun slowly rising over the battered land. The Mustang's sacrifice was burned into his memory forever, a guardian spirit who had given everything so that hope might live. When Ryan finally staggered back inside, his clothes and skin coated in dust and grief, Hope was sleeping peacefully. He knelt beside her, tears still running down his cheeks, whispering promises he didn't know how to keep. Outside, the storm had passed, but inside Ryan's heart, something fierce and bright had begun to grow. Morning broke sharp and clear over the New Mexico desert. The light gold and unforgiving, the air washed clean by the violence of the night. Ryan woke curled on the ragged rug beside the couch, his back sore, his mind still battered by dreams of running, wind, and loss. For a moment, he thought it had all been some wild nightmare, a feverish vision brought on by loneliness and fear. But then he heard the quiet, steady breaths of hope, and the ache in his chest told him everything was painfully real. He forced himself up, moving with the heavy weight of exhaustion. The little girl was asleep, her cheeks flushed but no longer burning with fever. Her hair was a tangled mess on the pillow, her tiny fist still clutching the note. Ryan touched her forehead. Cool. Relief flooded him, so intense it made him dizzy. He almost laughed. "You did it, kid," he whispered, stroking her hair. "You're a fighter." But joy faded fast as he remembered the Mustang. Grief came in a sudden, savage wave. Ryan looked out the window. The world outside painted in pale orange light. The sand had drifted high along the edges of the trailer, and in the yard, Solace's golden body lay half-buried, unmoving. The horse's face was turned toward the house, toward Hope's window, the eyes closed and gentle even in death. He swallowed hard. Every part of him wanted to hide, to forget, to curl up beside Hope and pretend that courage and sacrifice were just stories. But Solace deserved better than that. Hope deserved better too. Pulling on battered jeans and a threadbare jacket, Ryan grabbed the old shovel from behind the shed. The wood was splintered, the metal blade warped, but it would have to do. He stood over Solace, hands shaking, breath coming fast. "Thank you," he murmured, the words sticking in his throat. He remembered stories his mom used to tell, about Mustangs and spirit animals, about bravery and love. He'd never believed them until now. The ground was hard, packed with rocks and the memory of last night's storm. Ryan dug with all he had, sweat pouring down his face, blisters forming on his palms. He stopped only to wipe his eyes, unsure if the wetness was sweat or tears or both. A pair of ravens watched from a nearby fence post, silent witnesses to his work. The sun climbed higher, burning his back, but he kept going. When the hole was finally deep enough, Ryan knelt beside Solace, running his hand along the horse's neck one last time. "You saved her," he whispered. "You saved us." "I won't forget." He dragged, pushed, and begged his tired body to move the Mustang's body into the grave. It took nearly everything he had. When it was done, he covered Solace with earth and rocks, stacking them carefully. He found a piece of driftwood, smooth and sun-bleached, and pressed it into the ground at the head of the grave. He carved Solace with the tip of his pocket knife, then drew a rough heart underneath. Only when it was finished did Ryan let himself cry, sobs tearing free from some place so deep inside he didn't even know it was there. He cried for Solace, for his mother and sister, for the way the world could be so cruel and so beautiful at the same time. And when he was done, something in him felt lighter, even if only by a little. He returned to the trailer, hands raw and shaking, heart scraped clean. Hope was awake, sitting up on the couch, her big eyes watching him. She looked scared, uncertain, but when he knelt beside her, she reached out, clinging to his arm. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. You're safe." She didn't speak, just buried her face in his shirt, breathing in slow and deep, like maybe she could smell the safety on him. Ryan felt a fierce tenderness swell up in him, bigger than any grief, stronger than the fear that still lurked in the corners of his mind. He took stock of their supplies, his sense of relief quickly replaced by dread. The storm had ruined almost everything. What little canned food he had was scattered and buried under sand. His emergency water supply was tipped over, half empty and full of grit. The tiny generator was dead, and the road out, he could see through the dirty window, was blocked by a tangle of downed brush and mud. The world had shrunk to a small, battered trailer and a yard with a fresh grave. But he wasn't helpless. Ryan found the old camera his mom used to use, tucked in a drawer under stacks of unpaid bills. He snapped a picture of Solace's grave, then of Hope on the couch, wrapped in the faded quilt. He started a journal, writing down everything that had happened: the storm, the Mustang, Hope's arrival, and his promise. If the world came knocking, he wanted proof, not just that he'd tried, but that he'd loved, that he'd mattered. Each day blurred into the next. Ryan rationed food, boiling water from the rain barrel, using a strip of cloth to filter out the grit. He set up a fortress in the trailer, making sure Hope stayed warm and clean. He taught her to play Go Fish with a battered deck of cards. Sometimes she would smile, the corners of her mouth twitching in surprise. Those moments kept him going. He scouted the road, climbing the nearby hill to look for help. But all he saw was emptiness stretching for miles. Sand, sage, and the endless sky. When Hope cried at night, he held her close, whispering stories about wild horses and magic desserts, promising that tomorrow would be better. Ryan didn't know if it was enough, but every night, before he fell asleep beside Hope, he wrote in his journal, "I am her guardian now. I will protect her no matter what. I will not give up." The storm had taken almost everything, but it had left him with something too, something like hope. And that, he realized, might just be enough. Days blurred together after the storm, time marked only by the stubborn glow of the sun and the soft, uncertain rhythm of Hope's recovery. Ryan did everything he could to keep them both alive. He rationed every bite of food, boiled the muddy water for drinking, and did his best to keep Hope entertained, even as the little girl clung to him with a desperation that never faded. She rarely spoke, but her eyes followed him everywhere, tracking his every movement as if the world might vanish if she blinked. On the fourth morning after the storm, a strange silence fell over the trailer park. The ravens were gone, and even the wind had stilled, as if the desert was holding its breath. Ryan had just finished boiling a pot of rainwater when he heard the crunch of tires on gravel, a sound that sent a bolt of fear straight through his chest. He darted to the window, peeking through a strip of cardboard taped over the broken glass. A green pickup truck with the Forest Service logo rolled slowly into the yard, trailing dust. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, wearing the hat and uniform of a ranger. He scanned the battered trailer, then called out in a steady, no-nonsense voice, "Hello? Anybody home? Forest Service, just checking after the storm." Ryan's pulse hammered. He scooped Hope into his arms, hiding her behind the battered couch. His mind racing. If anyone found her, if child services got involved, they'd be separated. He'd heard enough stories from the other kids in town. He pressed a finger to his lips, and Hope nodded, burying her face in his shirt. The ranger knocked, then tried the handle. The door groaned open, the smell of dust and boiled water spilling into the dry air. "Hello?" the man called again. His eyes landed on Ryan, and he softened just a bit. "Hey, son, are you all right?" "I'm Don, Ranger Don. They sent me out to check on folks after the storm." Ryan didn't answer, just hugged Hope tighter, willing her to stay silent. Don looked around, taking in the sand piled against the door, the taped-up windows, the meager food piled on the counter. "You weathered a tough one, huh? You got any other family out here?" "No," Ryan said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "Just me." Don crouched down, his eyes kind but sharp. "You sure about that? Word's gone around. Some folks say they saw a wild Mustang out here dragging something. Heard it saved a little kid. You see anything like that?" Ryan's mouth went dry. He shook his head, but his hands trembled. Hope clung to his shirt, peeking over his shoulder. Don's gaze sharpened. "Son, I'm not here to get anyone in trouble, but if there's a child in this trailer, I need to know. These storms are dangerous. Kids need help, not secrets." Ryan swallowed hard. He knew the truth was coming for him, whether he liked it or not. He set Hope down, his hand resting on her back, and turned to face Dawn. She's not mine," he said softly. "But she's got nobody. She needs me." Dawn's expression changed, compassion mixing with worry. He crouched lower, at eye level with Hope. "Hey there, sweetheart. My name's Dawn. You hurt anywhere?" Hope whimpered, pressing herself closer to Ryan. Dawn glanced at the faded note Ryan clutched in his fist. "I see," he said gently. "Let's get her checked out. All right? She looks pretty rough. There's a clinic in town not far. I can drive you both." Ryan hesitated, dread twisting his gut. He knew what happened at clinics. Doctors called child services, and then everything fell apart. "She's scared," he managed. "She just needs rest." "She needs a doctor," Dawn insisted, voice gentle but firm. "So do you, by the look of things." Ryan bit his lip. The truth was, Hope had barely eaten for days, and the bruises on her arms worried him. He wanted to help her, not make things worse. Finally, he nodded. "Okay," he said, voice barely more than a whisper. "But I'm not leaving her." Dawn helped them into the truck, Hope wedged between Ryan and the door, clinging to his shirt the whole drive. The small-town clinic was clean and bright, a sharp contrast to the dusty, battered world Ryan was used to. Nurses swarmed them with questions. "Where did you find her? What happened? Is she yours?" And every word made Ryan flinch. He watched Hope's eyes go wide and terrified, her tiny hands squeezing his until her knuckles turned white. A nurse tried to lead Hope away, but she screamed, a raw animal sound that froze everyone in the room. "No!" she shrieked, clinging to Ryan, refusing to let go. Ryan felt panic rise in his throat. "I promised her I'd stay," he begged. "Please don't take her." The commotion brought the clinic's social worker running. She wore a badge and a forced smile, but her questions were quick and cold. "Are you her legal guardian? Where are her parents? When did you last eat? Is your trailer safe? We'll have to notify Child Protective Services." Don watched it all with a hard frown. He put himself between Ryan and the crowd, arms folded. "Give them space," he snapped. "Let the boy stay with her." The nurse relented. Ryan knelt by Hope's side while a doctor examined her, checking for injuries, testing her reflexes. They found old bruises and a low-grade fever, but nothing life-threatening. Still, the social worker hovered nearby, phone already in hand, ready to call the authorities. Ryan's heart hammered. He tried to remember what his mom had said about staying calm, about telling the truth, about fighting for the people you love. When the social worker asked him if he wanted Hope to be taken somewhere safe, he shook his head fiercely. She's already safe. She's safe with me. The room grew tense. Dawn met Ryan's eyes, and something passed between them. Trust, or maybe just the understanding that, in this fight, Ryan was all Hope had. Dawn spoke up, voice firm. I found them together. The boy saved her life. That should count for something. The social worker hesitated, but Hope's screaming had already drawn attention. The clinic's doctor finally nodded. He can stay, she said, as long as he's calm. Ryan held Hope close, promising her, promising himself, that he wouldn't let go. For now, at least, they were together. But outside, a storm of a different kind was gathering, and Ryan could feel its weight pressing in on all sides. Ryan sat on a hard plastic chair in the corner of the clinic, legs bouncing with anxiety. The stale air buzzed with the low voices of nurses, doctors, and social workers, all moving in and out of Hope's exam room. He kept one hand on the armrest, the other gripping his battered journal like a lifeline. Every so often he heard Hope whimper, her voice echoing in the hallway, and each time it felt like a hook twisting deeper into his chest. He couldn't shake the sense that something irreversible had started. After everything, the storm, Solace's sacrifice, the struggle to keep Hope alive. Now he faced a new threat, colder and more relentless than the desert wind. The system. The county child services worker, Ms. Berg, entered, clipboard in hand, lips pressed in a thin line. She was efficient, her movements sharp, her eyes assessing Ryan with a kind of professional skepticism he recognized from years of adults who never really listened. She spoke in clipped, rehearsed phrases. We're concerned about Hope's welfare. She needs stable housing, regular meals, adult supervision. Can you provide these things, Ryan? Ryan's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, but Ms. Berg continued, not really waiting for his answer. You're 15. You live alone. Child Protective Services has a duty to place Hope in a safe, stable foster environment. We've already started looking into available homes. A wave of panic crashed over Ryan. He could see Hope through the window, her eyes searching the hallway for him, refusing food from a nurse, her fists tight at her sides. She's safe with me, he blurted. I take care of her. Please don't take her away. Ms. Berg sighed. It isn't about what you want, Ryan. It's about what's best for Hope. The words stung. Ryan felt his voice tremble. She's all I have left. And I'm all she has. Please. At that moment, Don, the ranger, stepped in, his broad frame filling the doorway. He glanced at Ms. Berg, then crouched beside Ryan, lowering his voice. You've done more for her than most adults would, but this is going to be a fight. Don asked Ryan for his journal, flipping through the pages. Drawings of Solace, photos of Hope wrapped in blankets, neat lists of meals, temperatures, and the story of the storm. Don nodded. You documented everything, he said. That's good. It matters. They spent the next hour filling out paperwork, answering questions for Ms. Berg and her supervisor. Where did you find Hope? Did you know her parents? What happened to the Mustang? What are your living conditions? Have you ever been in trouble with the law? Each question more personal, more invasive, each answer carrying the weight of judgment. Ryan tried to stay calm. When he faltered, Dawn stepped in, telling the story of Solace's sacrifice, the long night spent fighting the storm, Ryan's courage and resolve. The staff listened, but Ryan saw the doubt in their eyes. He was just a boy, alone, living in a trailer that barely kept out the rain. Child Services sent a caseworker to inspect the trailer. Ryan followed, stomach in knots, as the man poked through every cabinet, tested the faucet, took pictures of the leaky roof and the small grave in the yard. The man jotted notes, never smiling, never saying if what he saw was enough. "You did the best you could," Dawn said quietly as they left. But it might not be enough for them. Days passed in a blur of phone calls and meetings. Ryan was summoned to the courthouse, his heart pounding as he stood before the judge. A woman with tired eyes and an unreadable expression. Ms. Berg argued that Hope needed a foster family. Ryan listened, fists clenched at his sides, as the judge listed every reason he was unfit. His age, his poverty, his lack of legal status. When it was Ryan's turn, he stood, voice shaking, and told the judge about Solace, the Mustang who gave his life to save Hope. He spoke of the long nights, the empty cupboards, the way Hope clung to him when the world felt cold and empty. "She doesn't need a perfect home," he said. "She needs someone who won't give up on her." Dawn stepped forward to vouch for him, bringing Ryan's journal and the story of Solace. A local teacher who'd once seen Ryan help at the food pantry stood and spoke for him too, describing the boy's quiet courage. A store owner submitted a letter saying Ryan always put Hope's needs first, buying medicine and food for her before himself. Despite this, the judge hesitated. "This is not a stable environment," she said. "Hope needs routine, security, the resources a proper family can provide." Child Services arranged a series of interviews. Psychologists, caseworkers, even a foster family who visited the clinic. Through it all, Hope refused to speak to anyone but Ryan. She ignored their toys, rejected their food, screamed and cried whenever they tried to take her hand. She only calmed when Ryan was near. One evening, as the sun set behind the courthouse, Ms. Berg approached Ryan with a softer look than before. "She only eats with you. She only sleeps when you're there. She won't let anyone else touch her. Why do you think that is?" Ryan swallowed. "Because I'm the only one who didn't give up on her." Miss Berg nodded, writing something in her folder. "That matters," she said quietly. "But it may not be enough." The judge scheduled a final hearing, leaving Hope with Ryan in a small room in the courthouse. For observation. Hope climbed into his lap, arms around his neck, eyes closed. Ryan stroked her hair, feeling the weight of the world pressing down, knowing the fight was far from over. He looked out the window at the fading sun and promised Hope, promised himself, that no matter what came next, he wouldn't let her go. News of the Mustang boy and the miracle child spread through the small town of Luna like wildfire. At first, it was just a whisper, an unbelievable story about a wild horse that saved a dying toddler, a teenage boy living alone in a trailer, and a sandstorm that nearly swept them both away. But in a place where everyone thought they knew everyone, people were hungry for something good, something wild and brave to talk about. By the end of the week, nearly everyone in Luna had chosen a side. Some thought it was reckless, a boy raising a toddler, alone, in a trailer with holes in the roof and barely enough food to last a month. They shook their heads at the grocery store, clucked their tongues at the post office, whispered about Ryan's mother, her bad luck, her stubbornness, and what became of her children. Others saw something else, a spark, a stubbornness they recognized as their own. They remembered the story of Solace, the Mustang who'd given his life to protect a child. That kind of love made even the most jaded folks sit up and listen. The local teacher, Ms. Ferris, was the first to speak up. She'd seen Ryan help Hope at the clinic, had read the journal where he tracked every fever, every scraped knee, every time Hope called his name in the night. "He's more responsible than half the adults I know," she told anyone who would listen. "He doesn't just care for her. He loves her." Next came Mr. Delgado, who ran the town's only grocery store. He remembered Ryan coming in every week, counting his pennies for milk and bread, always asking if there was any work to earn a few extra dollars. "He buys for the girl before he buys for himself," Mr. Delgado said, waving receipts as proof. That's family, but it wasn't all support. At the town meeting that Friday night, a group of parents raised concerns about liability. What if Hope got hurt? What if the state blamed Luna for letting a minor care for a child? The sheriff, who'd lost his own boy in a car crash, said quietly that the law was clear. Child Services had the final say. Ryan sat in the back of the meeting hall, Hope asleep in his lap, her thumb tucked in her mouth. Dawn, the ranger, stood beside him, arms folded. The room was full, some faces kind, others closed and cold. Ms. Berg, the social worker, stood at the front, fielding questions and writing notes in her folder. "What happens if he loses?" someone called out. "Hope will be placed in foster care," Ms. Berg said, her voice carrying a practiced calm. "It's not about punishment. It's about safety." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Ms. Ferris stood, her voice trembling but loud. "Who here can say they would do better than Ryan? Who would give more, risk more, love harder than this boy?" For a long moment, no one spoke. Then an older man in the corner, Mr. Norris, who'd lost his wife the winter before, stood up. "That horse gave his life for that child," he said. "Seems to me, the least we can do is stand up for the boy who tried to honor that sacrifice." Others nodded, some clapping quietly. Still, the meeting ended with no answers. Only the sense that something bigger than law or tradition was at stake. That weekend, a young reporter from the state capitol arrived, camera in hand, chasing the story that had caught fire on social media. She filmed Ryan and Hope walking to the trailer, took photos of Solace's grave, interviewed Dawn, Ms. Ferris, and even Ms. Berg. The piece aired Sunday night. The Mustang Boy and the Miracle Child, a town divided. After that, everything changed. People who'd avoided Ryan before, afraid of his mother's reputation, uncomfortable with his loneliness, now found reasons to stop by. They brought casseroles, old children's books, a faded teddy bear for Hope. Mrs. Redford, who owned the bakery, dropped off fresh bread every morning, slipping a note inside. "You are not alone." The mailman brought extra stamps, just in case Ryan needed to write letters to the court. But for every act of kindness, there was still suspicion. A few parents told their kids not to play with Hope, worried about drama. The judge received anonymous letters warning her not to reward lawlessness. The pastor mentioned Ryan in his Sunday sermon, the least of these, without quite saying whether the boy was a caution or an inspiration. Hope's health improved, but the tension in town grew. One afternoon, Ryan found her sitting quietly by Solace's grave, tracing the letters in the wood with her finger. "Do you miss him?" she asked, voice small. Ryan knelt beside her. "Every day," he said. "But I think he's still looking out for us." Don stopped by that evening, bringing supplies and news. "You've got more support than you think," he told Ryan. "But you need to show the judge you're not alone. Community matters in these cases." Ryan stared at his calloused hands. "How do I prove I can give her a real home?" Don smiled, tired but warm. "You already are. Just let them see it." That night, Ryan started a new ritual. Each evening, after dinner, he and Hope planted wildflowers around Solace's grave. He read to her from books borrowed from Ms. Ferris, stories of horses, brave girls, and boys who refused to quit. Sometimes other kids joined them, drawn by the story and by Hope's quiet laughter, returning slowly after so much fear. One day, as Ryan was hauling a sack of groceries up the porch, he heard a yelp from the alley. A skinny, mud-covered puppy cowered behind a trash can, trembling. Hope's eyes lit up. "Can we keep him?" she whispered. Ryan hesitated, remembering the struggle to feed themselves, but Hope wrapped her arms around the pup, and something in Ryan softened. "Only if you help take care of him," he said, grinning for the first time in weeks. They named the puppy Lucky, and suddenly their family felt a little bigger, a little stronger. As the day of the final hearing drew near, Ryan realized he was no longer just fighting for Hope. He was fighting for everyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough, everyone who'd ever needed a second chance. And this time, he wasn't standing alone. The night before the final court hearing, Ryan barely slept. He lay awake on his narrow mattress, listening to Hope's steady breathing, the soft snuffling of Lucky curled up at her feet, and the faint whine of the desert wind brushing against the trailer walls. Every time he closed his eyes, memories flooded him. Solace braving the sandstorm, Hope clinging to him at the clinic, the relentless questions from judges and social workers. Each memory pressed on his chest until he sat up, breath shallow, heart pounding. He stared at the clock until the first gray light crept over the horizon. In a few hours, everything would change, one way or another. He went to the kitchen, made weak coffee, and packed Hope's things in an old backpack. Her favorite faded blanket, a chipped storybook, and a crumpled photo of Solace's grave. He tucked his journal in beside them, just in case. By the time Hope woke up, wide-eyed and silent, the morning sun was already blazing, turning the world outside molten gold. Don arrived early to drive them to the courthouse. He wore a pressed shirt, hair neatly combed, a gravity in his eyes Ryan hadn't seen before. "It's going to be tough," he said quietly. "But you've got a lot of people behind you now." Ryan nodded, gripping Hope's hand as they walked to the truck. The ride into town felt endless, every mile stretching his nerves tighter. Hope clung to her blanket, whispering to Lucky, who licked her face with gentle concern. Don kept glancing in the rearview mirror, his jaw tight. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors, classmates, Ms. Ferris, Mr. Delgado, and even a few strangers holding homemade signs. Let them stay together. Family isn't always blood. Ryan felt a rush of warmth and dread. This wasn't just his fight anymore. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The judge sat on her high bench, eyes sharp, lips set in a thin line. Ms. Berg and the Foster family sat on one side, arms folded, faces tight. Ryan and Hope sat together at a small table, Don at their side. Ms. Ferris and Mr. Delgado were seated behind them, nodding encouragement. The hearing began. Ms. Berg argued her case with practiced efficiency, pointing out every risk. Ryan's age, the poor condition of the trailer, the instability of their life. Hope needs more than love, she said. She needs security, structure, resources. The foster mother spoke next, voice gentle, hands folded. We'd welcome Hope as our own. She'd have a sister her age, a backyard, plenty to eat. Ryan's stomach twisted. He glanced at Hope, who was hugging her backpack, face pale. Then Don stood and spoke for them. He told the story of Solace's sacrifice, how Ryan had kept meticulous records, how he'd called for help when Hope was sick, how the town had rallied to support them. He handed the judge Ryan's journal, the letters from Ms. Ferris and Mr. Delgado, photos of the wildflowers and Solace's grave. Family is more than blood or paperwork, Don finished. Sometimes it's two souls who refuse to give up on each other. Finally, it was Ryan's turn. He stood, palms sweating, voice shaking. I know I'm not what people expect, he said, but I promised Hope I'd never leave her. She's not just a responsibility, she's my family. The judge listened in silence, flipping through the journal. Hope, she said, her tone gentle. Do you want to say anything? Hope's lower lip trembled. She shook her head and pressed closer to Ryan. The judge sighed. We'll take a short recess, she said, and left the room. Ryan sank into his chair, fighting back tears. Ms. Berg stood in the hallway, conferring with the foster family. Don squeezed Ryan's shoulder. No matter what happens, you did everything you could. Suddenly, chaos erupted. An urgent call came from the foster mother. Hope was gone. One moment she'd been sitting quietly, the next she'd vanished. Panic swept through the courthouse as staff fanned out, searching every hallway, restroom, and parking lot. Ryan's heart lurched. He darted outside, calling her name, searching the sidewalk, the park, even the alley behind the bakery. Don and Ms. Ferris joined the search, calling out for Hope, asking everyone if they'd seen a little girl in a faded blue dress, clutching a stuffed puppy. Minutes felt like hours. Then, a boy from town, face smudged with dust, ran up, breathless. She's down by the old oak near the edge of town, by that grave. Ryan didn't wait. He sprinted, lungs burning, legs pumping, fear driving him faster than he'd ever run. He reached Solace's grave and saw Hope curled on the ground, shivering, clutching her knees to her chest. Lucky licked her face, whining anxiously. Ryan knelt, breathless, gathering her into his arms. She sobbed, "Don't let them take me. Please, don't leave me." He rocked her gently. "I'm here, I promise. I'll always find you." Don caught up, breath ragged, relief plain on his face. Miss Berg and the foster mother arrived a minute later, eyes wide with shock and worry. "She ran all the way here," Don said softly, "to Solace, to home." Ms. Berg knelt, seeing Hope's fear and desperation. For the first time, her professional mask slipped. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "We just want what's best." But the town had seen enough. Word spread, and soon a crowd gathered at the grave. Neighbors, classmates, old-timers. They demanded Hope be returned to Ryan. Mrs. Redford, voice trembling with emotion, said, "Family is where you're loved. Let her stay." As dusk settled, the judge arrived, listening to the pleas of a town united. She saw Hope clinging to Ryan, refusing comfort from anyone else. At last, she nodded. "We'll reconvene tomorrow," she said. "But tonight, Hope goes home. With Ryan." Ryan held Hope close, tears streaming down his face, surrounded by the people who finally understood that family was something you chose, and something worth fighting for. Morning broke over Luna with a sky streaked in rose and orange, painting the battered trailer and the graveyard of wildflowers with a gentle light. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ryan woke up not with a start or a racing heart, but to the quiet, steady rhythm of Hope's breathing beside him. Lucky was sprawled across both of their legs, snoring softly. Ryan let himself just breathe, eyes closed, hand resting on Hope's small shoulder. He didn't know what would come today. He only knew that last night, as dusk settled and the town gathered beneath the old oak tree, something had changed. Not just for him and Hope, but for everyone who watched a desperate girl run from a courthouse to the grave of the Mustang who saved her. The world had seen how far she would go to stay with the only family she had left, and maybe, just maybe, the world had finally listened. By noon, Don was at their door. He brought cinnamon rolls from the bakery, the smell sweet and heavy in the air. He also brought news. "Judge Price wants to see you," Don said, voice gentle. "But she asked me to come along. She's not making you do this alone." Ryan swallowed, nerves fluttering in his stomach. Hope hugged Lucky to her chest, eyes wide. "It's okay," Ryan whispered. "We'll go together." At the courthouse, the judge was waiting. She looked tired, but there was a warmth in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Come in, Ryan, Hope. Don, thank you for being here." They sat together in the judge's office. No benches, no gavel, no cold distance. Just a small circle of chairs, sunlight pouring in from tall windows. The judge folded her hands, looking at them both. "You've been through more than most adults ever will," she said quietly. "And yet, here you are, together." She explained the court's decision. "I am granting Ryan temporary custody of Hope," the judge said, "under Don's supervision as your mentor. That means you get to go home together. You'll check in with me with child services, but you won't be separated." For a long moment, Ryan couldn't move. Then Hope launched herself into his lap, clutching his neck so tightly he could barely breathe. "We get to stay?" she whispered. Ryan nodded, fighting tears. Don grinned, his relief plain. "You earned this, kid." Back home, the sun was high and hot, but the world seemed softer somehow. Ryan and Hope cleaned the trailer, sweeping out the last of the storm grit. Don showed Ryan how to fix the leaky sink, replace a busted window pane, and make the front step safe again. "You're a homeowner now," Don teased, handing Ryan a battered tool belt. "Better learn how to fix what breaks." They planted marigolds and wild daisies around Solace's grave. Hope patting the earth gently, Ryan tucking in bulbs his mother had once saved for someday. The grave became a garden, a place of memory, yes, but also of hope. With Don's guidance, Ryan learned new routines. He set alarms for meals, posted a schedule on the fridge, baths, homework, chores, story time. Neighbors dropped by to help. Ms. Ferris brought coloring books. Mr. Delgado stopped in with fresh fruit and a story about his own childhood, and Mrs. Redford invited them to the bakery to knead dough together on weekends. Slowly, Hope found her laughter again. She chased Lucky through the yard, shrieking with joy as the puppy tumbled and barked. She learned to read new words, tracing them out in chalk on the porch. Home, family, courage. Some nights Ryan still woke from nightmares, flashes of storms and empty cupboards, of voices telling him he wasn't enough. But he'd find Hope curled against him, her breathing slow and safe, and he'd remember Solace standing guard outside the window, facing the storm. That memory, and the new ones they were making, gave him strength. One afternoon, Dawn stopped by with an unexpected gift, a box of old puppy supplies and a faded copy of The Little Prince. "It's about a boy who tames a wild thing," Dawn said, ruffling Hope's hair. "Thought you two might appreciate that." Hope grinned and insisted Ryan read the book aloud that night. They sat in the yard as the sun dipped low, Lucky asleep at their feet, wildflowers bobbing in the warm breeze. The words washed over them, quiet and healing. When Ryan finished, Hope whispered, "I'm glad you found me." Ryan smiled, his voice soft. "Me too, kiddo." "Me too." Days passed, each a little brighter than the last. The story of the Mustang boy and the miracle child made the local paper, then spread further. Strangers mailed cards and small gifts, some with stories of their own losses, their own second chances. Ryan kept everyone, a reminder that even in the middle of nowhere, people cared. At the next town meeting, the judge announced her decision. Ryan Quinn will remain Hope's guardian, with community support and Dawn's continued mentorship. Their family is a Luna family now. The room erupted in applause. Ms. Berg, the social worker, even managed to smile. "You proved us all wrong," she said to Ryan, "and I've never been happier to see it." As summer faded, Ryan, Hope, and Lucky built new rituals. Picnics at Solace's grave, Saturday breakfasts at the bakery, evening walks through fields of sage and wild marigolds. Their world was small, but it was fierce with love. They were no longer just survivors. They were a family, built by choice, by sacrifice, and by hope that refused to die. And every night, as the stars spilled over the desert sky, Ryan whispered a thank you to Solace, the horse who'd taught him what it meant to fight for someone, to love without promise of reward, to keep going when everything seemed lost. The months after the judge's ruling seemed to pass in a different kind of time, one measured not by fear but by small triumphs and the gentle rhythm of belonging. The desert was greening after late summer rains, wildflowers crowding Solace's grave, and the town of Luna, once divided, found itself drawn together by the strange, beautiful story that had unfolded on its dusty outskirts. Ryan and Hope created new traditions, their days filled with routines that were both ordinary and miraculous. They woke early to walk Lucky through the cool dawn, pausing by Solace's resting place to leave wild daisies and whispered secrets. Hope sometimes crouched beside the grave, talking softly, as if the Mustang could still hear her, telling him about her dreams, her new words, or how Lucky had learned to fetch. One Saturday, as autumn painted the cottonwoods gold, Ryan pinned a note to the town bulletin board, "Community gathering at Solace's grave, to honor what's been lost and what's been found. All are welcome." He wasn't sure anyone would come. For so long, he'd kept his world small, guarded, private, shaped by the hard lessons of grief and survival. But Dawn encouraged him. "People want to help," the ranger said. "They just need someone to show them how." The day of the gathering dawned crisp and bright. Ryan and Hope spent the morning clearing brush from around the grave, setting out folding chairs, and stringing up homemade garlands of marigolds and sage. Hope made a sign with careful block letters, "Thank you, Solace." By late afternoon, neighbors began to arrive. Ms. Ferris with a tray of muffins, Mr. Delgado balancing lemonade and a camera, Mrs. Redford carrying a bouquet from her garden. Even Ms. Berg, the social worker, came, dressed in jeans instead of her usual business suit, a rare smile lighting her face. Dozens of people gathered in a loose circle, children chasing Lucky through the grass, adults shaking Ryan's hand or clapping him on the back. Ryan stood by Solace's grave, Hope at his side, her hand curled tight around his. He cleared his throat, heart hammering. For a moment, the old fear threatened to choke him. Fear of being seen, of being judged, of not being enough. But he looked at Hope, at Dawn standing nearby, at all the faces turned toward him with hope and respect, and found his courage. "I want to thank you all for coming," he began, voice trembling just a little. "And I want to thank Solace, not just for saving Hope, but for teaching me what it means to care about someone so much. You'd give up everything to protect them." He told their story, how he found hope and solace in the desert, how the Mustang had braved the storm, how the community had stepped in when he felt alone. He spoke of grief, of missing his mother, his little sister, and of how losing Solace had cracked him open in a way he hadn't known was possible. "I didn't want to let anyone in," he admitted. "But you all proved that you can lose almost everything and still find a family, if you're willing to accept it." The wind rustled through the flowers, and Hope stepped forward, holding up a picture she'd drawn. 3 figures standing beneath a rainbow, Solace's golden mane bright above them. "This is us," she said softly. The crowd murmured, touched by the simple hope in her voice. Others shared stories, too. Ms. Ferris spoke of losing her husband and finding meaning again as a teacher. Mr. Delgado told how the town came together after a wildfire years ago. Mrs. Redford recalled her own struggles as a young widow raising 3 boys. Even Don, usually quiet, spoke of his first months in Luna, and how Ryan and Hope had reminded him why he'd chosen a life of service. As the sun dipped low, the gathering turned into a celebration. Someone started a song, an old cowboy ballad, and others joined in. Hope danced with Lucky, her laughter ringing out, clear and strong. Ryan felt the last stubborn shards of loneliness start to fall away, replaced by something he could finally call peace. Afterward, people left small tokens at Solace's grave. Smooth stones, wildflowers, even a tiny silver horseshoe. It became a place of memory for the whole town, a symbol not just of loss, but of hope and resilience. In the weeks that followed, the Quinn trailer was never empty. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles, groceries, or just a kind word. Hope had sleepovers with friends from school, giggling late into the night. Ryan found himself invited to community dinners, asked for advice by other kids, treated not as a curiosity, but as a member of the Luna family. Hope's laughter grew louder, her steps more confident. She learned to ride a bike, scraped her knees, and came running to Ryan for comfort. At night, they read together, books stacking up beside the bed. Sometimes, when Hope fell asleep, Ryan would step outside, staring up at the stars. He'd talk to his mother, to Solace, to the wide desert night, thanking them for giving him a second chance, for teaching him that real healing was something you did together. As fall faded into winter, Luna came alive with holiday lights and hope. At the annual tree lighting, the mayor told the story of the Mustang and the miracle child, and the crowd cheered for Ryan and Hope as they flipped the switch. Dawn took a photo of the moment, a new family, surrounded by a new kind of love. For Ryan, it was the beginning of something he'd once thought impossible. Not just survival, but a real home, a place where memories of loss could live side by side with laughter, where pain and healing grew in the same soil. Where Solace's legacy became a bridge for everyone who'd ever felt alone. And through it all, Ryan learned that the greatest gift wasn't just having hope. It was giving it away again and again until it came back to you multiplied. 1 year later, the New Mexico desert greeted the sunrise with the same quiet strength that had marked every morning of Ryan's life since the storm. The world outside the trailer seemed almost unchanged, sagebrush whispering in the early light, the sky opening wide and blue over miles of sand and wildflowers. But inside the little house at the edge of Luna, everything was different. Ryan stood by the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching Hope braid her hair at the table. She had grown taller, stronger. There was a steadiness in her gaze now, the wariness of that lost little girl replaced by the easy trust that came from being loved every single day. Lucky, their dog, sprawled at her feet, tail thumping whenever Hope's bare toes brushed his side. The anniversary weighed on Ryan, a quiet ache mixed with gratitude. A year ago, he'd found hope and solace in the desert, and everything had changed. The memories still lived inside him, sharp but softer now. Sometimes, on sleepless nights, he remembered his mother and baby sister, and the sorrow would settle over him like a gentle rain, not a storm. But most mornings, like this one, the feeling was different, a kind of peace he'd fought hard to build. After breakfast, Ryan and Hope dressed in their best clothes, clean jeans, sun-faded shirts, Lucky's collar brushed and shiny. They walked hand in hand to Solace's grave, a ritual that never felt old. The wildflowers Hope had planted with neighbors crowded the headstone, their bright faces open to the sun. They stood in silence for a moment. Hope placed a new drawing on the grave. A family of 3, a boy, a girl, and a golden Mustang, all framed by a ring of flowers. Ryan knelt and pressed his palm to the earth. "Thank you," he whispered. "We carry you with us, every day." Afterward, the town gathered for breakfast at the community hall. The mayor gave a short speech about the courage of those who refused to give up, and everyone clapped when Ryan and Hope were called forward. They shook hands, posed for a picture, and Hope blushed, hiding her face in Ryan's shirt as cameras flashed. Later, as the crowd drifted away, Don came over, pressing a weathered envelope into Ryan's hand. "Court's made it official," he said, eyes shining. "You're her legal guardian now. No more check-ins, no more court dates. You're a family, for good." Ryan turned the envelope over in his hands, not trusting himself to speak. When he finally opened it, Hope peeked at the document, her smile slow and real. "Does that mean you can never leave?" she asked, voice soft. Ryan grinned, pulling her close. "Never," he promised. "Not for anything." They walked home under a sky so blue it made Ryan's heart ache. The town felt different now. Neighbors waving, kids shouting hello, even Ms. Berg nodding with approval from her car. Mrs. Redford handed Hope a sack of fresh cookies, whispering, "For the family that made Luna whole again." At home, Ryan put the guardianship papers in a battered shoebox with his mother's old photos and his journal. He took a deep breath and looked around. The patched roof, the worn rug, the kitchen table crowded with drawings and school books. It was nothing fancy, but it was theirs. As the afternoon sun dipped low, Ryan and Hope took Lucky on a walk through the open fields behind the trailer. Hope chased butterflies, laughing as Lucky tumbled through the tall grass. Ryan watched her and realized he'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, stopped expecting the world to snatch away what he loved. That evening, as dusk settled and the desert glowed, Ryan and Hope sat together on the porch, sharing cookies and stories. Hope snuggled into his side. Will you always remember Solace? She asked quietly. Every day, Ryan replied. He showed us what real bravery looks like. Sometimes the ones who save us don't stay, but they leave something behind that changes everything. Hope nodded, her gaze thoughtful. Do you think other people will remember him too? Ryan smiled, pulling her close. They already do. Every time someone helps a neighbor, or forgives a mistake, or refuses to give up, that's his spirit. That's the legacy we carry. As the first stars appeared, Hope drifted off to sleep in Ryan's arms. He sat quietly, thinking about everything he'd learned, the meaning of family, the power of sacrifice, the beauty of broken things made whole. He realized that true family wasn't something you were given. It was something you built, brick by brick, with kindness, trust, and courage. Sometimes, the world was still hard. There were days when money was tight, when old fears tried to sneak back in. But Ryan had found something stronger than fear. Love that refused to quit. Hope that kept returning, like the sunrise over the desert. The next morning, they stood at the open door of their little house, Lucky at their side, sunlight flooding the kitchen. Hope took Ryan's hand and smiled, ready for whatever the world would bring. Together, they stepped outside. The whole horizon opened before them. And as they walked toward the new day, carrying Solace's spirit in their hearts, Ryan knew that no matter how tough life got, they'd never be alone again. Because home, he realized, was not a place or a promise. Home was the people who stayed, who fought for you, who believed in miracles, even in the middle of the desert. And that was a lesson that would last a lifetime.